Hi, welcome back to another episode of Opinionize. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the riots and protesting that's currently happening in France. If you're not familiar with the background that led up to these events, I can give you a quick overview. So on the morning of June 27th, 2023, a teenager, 17-year-old boy named Nahel Merzouk was driving his Mercedes, and the police observed some dangerous behavior. So Nahal was previously known to police, but I don't believe he actually had a criminal record at that point, but had some issues or some run-ins with police for failure to comply with other traffic stops. On this morning of the 27th, the police observed him driving, I believe, in a bus lane, but also disobeying and committing other traffic offenses, including endangering lives of pedestrians and cyclists. So he was being a dangerous driver at that point, and that's when they activated their lights and sirens to pull him over, and he continued on to get away from police. Eventually, he ran into traffic and had to stop. The police got off. I believe they were pursuing him on motorcycles. They got off their motorcycles, approached the driver's side of the with their guns drawn and pointing at the driver, and asked him to turn off the car and complied with their orders. At that point, the driver, Nahel, continued to drive forward, and one of the police officers fired a shot. This caused Nahel to lose his life. The protests began because or at least one of the reasons why is because of the initial report from the police was saying that the officer fired in self-defense because he was in front of the vehicle. And then later, a video was released online that contradicted that statement. And I'm not going to show the video here. I'll put the still image up, but I'm not going to show the full video. If you want to see it, it's circulating online. As a result, though, there has been several days of protesting, and there's been a lot of damage and destruction because of these protests, including to town halls, schools, police stations, and other buildings. In fact, the Interior Ministry has estimated that damages and injuries due to the riots are around 5,000 vehicles have been set on fire, around 10,000 garbage cans have been set on fire or damaged, and nearly 1,000 buildings have been burned or damaged or even looted. 250 police stations have been attacked, and more than 700 police officers have been injured. So according to the prosecution's version of events that took place that day, 2 Paris police officers on motorcycles noticed the Mercedes-Benz that actually had a Polish license plate driving at high speeds and in the bus lane. And it was being driven by a young person around 8 a.m. or a little before 8 a.m. in the morning. So the officers activated their lights and sirens, indicated for the driver to pull over, and even at a red light, when the car was stopped, they tried to get the driver to pull over. At that point, though, the driver moved forward and even ran the red light. So officers pursued in the chase. Then the version of events continue that the car committed multiple traffic violations and endangered pedestrians and cyclists. Later, though, due to the traffic congestion, the vehicle was eventually forced to stop. And that's when police officers got off their motorcycles with their guns drawn and pointed at the driver and ordered him to turn off the engine. But instead, the car started to drive away, and one of the officers then fired. The vehicle continued a little bit further and then crashed eventually. There was a passenger in the back that was arrested, and then there was a passenger in the front that actually ran. The police officer that fired the shot gave first aid to the driver, but the driver unfortunately did not survive. Later, a video was released online, and the video contradicted some of those statements. So according to police, the officer fired his weapon at the driver because the driver was about to run him over. So essentially self-defense. And the video challenged that. The video is about 50 seconds long. Again, I'm not going to show it here. The video shows that the two police officers were on the driver's side of the car and that the car was moving when the police officer fired the shot, still at a very close range. So the third version of events actually is from one of the passengers in the car, and the passenger testified that the driver took several blows from the back of the gun. And according to them, after the third hit, that caused Merzouk's foot to come off of the brake pedal, and because the car was an automatic, that it rolled forward. And so that must have been the reason that the police officer thought that he was driving off. So I also wanted to bring up Google Maps here, and this is the satellite view from Google Maps showing the area of where this occurred. So in the center here we see Paris, and this actually the events happened in a suburb west of Paris, sort of in this location right here. So the officer that was involved in the shooting has been placed into custody and is under investigation and charged with voluntary homicide by a person in authority. So the police continue to maintain that the shooting was an act of self-defense. However, the mood is that the video contradicts that and is a big reason for the cause of the riots and protesting. There have been a couple investigations that have been started. The first is for refusal to comply and attempted voluntary homicide against a person in authority. And then the second investigation is for voluntary homicide by a person in authority. I also wanted to highlight this Reuters article here. It has a couple informative sections that paint a little bit more around what's going on, where it's happening in France, things like that. So one of these questions is it safe to travel in France? So as of July 3rd, the UK government advises to avoid areas where riots are taking place. Check the latest advice with operators when traveling and follow the advice of authorities. But doesn't warn against visiting any specific towns or cities. The latest alert from the U.S. Embassy in Paris related to the rioting was posted on June 29th with the advice that U.S. citizens should avoid mass gatherings and areas of significant police activity. It also does not warn against visiting any specific places. Who was a teenager killed? So we went over this a little bit earlier. What happened at the traffic stop? We covered that as well. Why did the riots unfold? So Nahel's death has fed longstanding complaints of police violence and systematic racism inside law enforcement agencies. Some 40,000 officers were deployed to curb the trouble, 5,000 in the Paris region. So it's sad what happened. I do think that investigation should be conducted to make sure, that there weren't issues of racism or anything like that caused this shooting. It's truly unfortunate that Nahel lost his life, and I feel sorry for his family and friends that are going through a difficult time now that he's gone. I think, though, that there's a couple things here in conclusion to discuss as far as the riots themselves and Nahel's behavior leading up to and even the morning of that these events took place. The fact that he was known to police officers as far as disobeying orders, and the fact that during that morning he failed to comply with orders. Whether you agree or disagree with them, at that point it's better to, in my opinion, pull over, address the situation in a respectful, lawful manner, and then have your time in court. I'm not familiar with the legal system in France particularly, but I would assume that that's a much better place in the court of law to argue your case than it is on the side of a road with police officers. So in that case, I don't know the full situation, why he was trying to run. I guess maybe if he's done it before and he's gotten away, maybe he's just trying to repeat successful actions that he's had in the past. But ultimately, I think that those choices are partly what led to what we're talking about here today. The other piece with the riots themselves, it's unfortunate to see the amount of destruction and other people that are getting hurt as a result of these riots. I fully support the right to protest and to demand change and accountability. I think, though, it's crossing a line when others are getting hurt and there's damage and destruction as a result. And it almost seems like the scope of these riots are losing sight of the original issue. I'm curious to know your opinion around this sad topic, and also your opinion on the riots, and if you agree with them, if you disagree with them, if things should change in France legally as far as police officers and their use of firearms. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this video, given that the subject matter is deep and heavy. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.